Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
If you want to succeed at doing pretty much anything, and especially within your career, and especially if you're leading somebody, leading a team, is your brain getting in the way of blocking your success? It's called situational awareness. And it's something that this guy deals with in many different forms. Interestingly, he is a pilot. He teaches flying, but he also coaches and helps people move their lives along that way. And we're going to talk about this whole thing, situational awareness, today with the guy that is behind coachingforrelevance.com. Randy Swaim is back with us. Hey, Randy, how are you?
Good to be back with you, Steve.
Same here. And that term, situational awareness, as soon as you say it right away, I get a picture of, say, a combat situation or flying, all of that, where you're aware of your situation, but sometimes your head gets in the way, right?
Yes, it does. And in fact, there have been a number of times where I've been, training another jet pilot, and my debriefing comment to him in some cases, I think the most recent time was about a week and a half ago, kind of thing. But I told him, I said, your stick and rudder skills, your flying ability is totally standard. It's totally good. But what's happening is you got to think about when your brain is getting in the way of what you're really trying to accomplish. Is it distracting? Is it getting in the way? Is it blocking what you're trying to really do? Because that does happen sometimes. And we can mention a couple of things back that, because you said you're right. In a military context, in an aviation context, it's really critical. But also in a leadership context, for anybody who's leading their team in their business, it's a critical type of thing. And in fact, I'll just kind of mention this one thing too, that it'll lead to a concept that I've brought out a number of times, and it's kind of rooted in neuroscience, which is the science of how the brain works and all of that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I tell people, and I think I've said this before on the show, that the brain has neurotransmitters, and what it does is it releases chemicals into all your synapses in your nerve system, and the chemical there will kind of generate your emotions, whether it's norepinephrine, whether it's acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine. And of course, dopamine is what your brain releases in order to make you feel applauded, and where people are sort of doing this in the background and kind of thing, and you feel like, oh man, I'm all that, kind of thing. And one of the things that I tell people is this aspect of, it's a term that I kind of created for myself, and it's the concept of dopamine fix. And there's a lot of people, I've seen examples of it like you wouldn't believe. In fact, I just submitted some work to the neuroscience group that I'm connected with and everything. And it's interesting because the concept that I look at is the dopamine fix. In other words, to what extent does somebody find themselves fixated on that? Because if you're fixated on that and that's your primary thing, guess what? It could keep you from seeing the one thing that you should have seen that you didn't. It could be something that there was one factor that you weren't aware of because your focus was on that. It could be that you're making assumptions about how you're interpreting the factors that are not totally true, kind of thing. And so one of the things that I tell people is when you're leading your team, or like you kind of implied correctly, if it's a flight crew or if it's a military group that you're leading in a challenging situation or whatever, you got to understand, is your situational awareness truly clear? Or to what extent are you just gravitating to a couple of rote, superficial academic thoughts? And that may not be totally true right there at that point of attack. And it's a key insight when you're talking about leadership and when you're talking about the concept of strategic planning and trying to get to our strategic objectives and all of that. And you'd be surprised. I think I may have mentioned this on a show a year ago or something like that here, but I mentioned this long time ago previously, that you'd be surprised at how many people I have seen, start down the way they want it to be, and then when it doesn't work, instead of correcting what their vision of it was, and instead of realizing that this is going to maybe be a little bit of a blockage here, what do I need to do for that? Instead of doing that, they just cast blame on this thing over there, and that's not what it should have been. Well, you know what? It was there. And are you aware of it? So when you talk about leading your teams and you talk about this aspect of really making your team better and making your business and company organization better and really reaching even further to the success than you expected to look at and all of that. These are the things that'll happen. And quite frankly, when you're going on the journey, there may come a factor on scene that not only initially makes you feel like that's resisting, but it may be opening a door that you didn't realize that's going to take you to a higher level. Are you aware of that? And so when you talk about, it's just a couple of things to think about, and you can kind of throw anything in you like, kind of thing, question wise or anything, but to what extent, and the way I put it is, to what extent are you focused on just committing to your dopamine fix? Or are you really, truly seeing the strategic, situational awareness? And
Is it Randy, a
yeah,
product of people wanting to see what they want to see, as opposed to really what the reality is that they're dealing with?
And you know what? That's a big part of it. Because they're just, they blame games if it's not just what I wanted to see. Well, guess what? At the beginning, it wasn't exactly that. It was in that direction. It sort of had a picture of some of that. But you know what? When you talk about an organizational maneuverability concept back here and stuff, the aspect on that, and you kind of implied correctly so, this is true in pilot and flight crews. This is true in military engagements and things like that. There's factors that come on the scene that you didn't expect. Are you ready for it? Can you adapt and reach the success with that there? And sometimes, like I said, sometimes the factor that comes on scene may initially look like it's a threat because it's a distraction from where you were going. But what if it's really opening a door that if you just corrected this much right here, you went to a higher level of success than you would have ever thought, possibly? And so it is kind of interesting when you're looking at that sort of stuff. And when you look at the neuroscience aspect on that, to what extent is your brain getting in the way because it's just totally dependent on the dopamine fixation, if you will? Or to what extent does your brain see the adaptive possibilities that could be coming on scene? To what extent do you shut your brain down because you just go into this blaming mode rather than, oh, you know what? If I just correct the course 5 degrees here, wow, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of aspects about that when you're talking about leading your teams. And when you look at this, I got to tell you that when you're talking about your team that's working for you, with you as a leader, guess what? Are you really modeling that for them? Do they see that in you? Because I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've seen people that were not good leaders, but they were, and they weren't in leadership positions, but they were trying to act like leaders over the people that they work with and everything. And you'd be surprised at how many times I've seen people kind of shut it down. And instead of doing anything, they just talk about blame gaming. Well, you know what, that should have been like this. It wasn't. That's just stupid, and all this kind of stuff. And as a leader, you're always modeling for your team, whether it's good or bad, because they're always experiencing you. And are you modeling something that's good, that's going to not only take your team to a much higher level of success than you ever envisioned, or are you modeling for your team the aspect that they become better? And you know what? Down the road, when they get promoted to a higher role in the company is better off. And so those are all some aspects when you're talking about this aspect of leadership, and the actual aspect of truly going in and seeing the no kidding situational awareness. And what's the unseen value in it, perhaps, or what's the risk? There could be risk in it. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to lead your team to adapt with a degree of confidence, perhaps, as opposed to just going into the blame game and stuff? And does your team have a sense where they can kind of experience you looking for all that as you walk the journey, as opposed to just falling back to the dopamine fix and just going, well, you know what, I had it right when it started. It just didn't come out right. Well, you know what? It's a changing world, as much as I hate to say it. There's things that adapt. There's things that come on that sometimes you didn't expect. And are you ready for that? Can you really reach success in that? And I'll tell you what, if your people see that to a certain extent in you, where there's a real synergy there and all that, I'll tell you what, they're going to follow you and they're going to communicate with you like you wouldn't believe. And they're going to become better.
Is a dopamine fix that bad?
You know what? The dopamine fix itself isn't. And because all it is just the dopamine that the brain releases when it's trying to make you happy that you chose the right answer on this question, or whatever
Right.
kind of thing. So it's not that bad. But here's the thing: it's never totally controlling. And that's what people don't realize. And there's a number of neurotransmitters that the brain releases. Dopamine is one of them, and that's for the applause and the pat on the back and the slap on the back and all that kind of stuff, the graduation and all that, where you feel like it's just wow, yeah. But then there's also something that's serotonin, which means I feel rested and I feel relaxed here. Oxytocin is one that brings a degree of synergy where you really feel connection with your people and all that. And the brain doesn't just release one. Based on what the brain is sensing, it'll release some of those to generate that in you. And as a leader, if you totally gravitate to that dopamine fix, guess what? That's your choice. Is that the choice you really want to make? And it's it's a good question that you asked, but yeah, it's not ultimately controlling. But like we said at the beginning, to what extent do you see your brain getting in the way, as opposed to really helping you get there? If the brain just says, well, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. Okay, just be happy with myself and kind of thing. Guess what? It's getting in the way. But if you say, I sense that, I know where that's coming from. You know what? Yeah, there is a reason we should all be happy about this, but you know what? We still got a little bit further to go. And I'll tell you what, we can get higher than we thought, and let's do it. And so all of that is a key role of the leadership.
So I'm thinking here, you go through your day, no matter what your role is. Let's say you could be part of the team, you could be the team leader. And there are certain things that you need to get done, but some things that you'd rather do over the other things. And I look at that and I'm thinking, well, that's probably the dopamine rush. I'm going to do that because that's going to make me feel good. Is that such a bad thing?
It depends. And here's what I would say from the leadership of that team. Here's the thing: is the sense of that dopamine driven by exactly the same thing for everybody in your team? If it is, that might be something you got to lead the team to overcome. But you know what? It may be that this point makes you feel that dopamine, and this one over here makes me feel that. And oh, by the way, both of those are good for our team and our company. And this one makes Billy Bob over here feel that. And that's good for our team. You know what? As a leader, do you have a sense of those aspects where, you know what? You may have one person kind of playing a little bit of a leadership role in the team as they're doing this. But then when this comes up, this person is the one that can do that better. And you do it, and you all do it as a synergistic thing. And so all of that is part of leadership, particularly when you're in a challenging, unpredictable VUCA environment. And so it's a good question that you raised, but it's just some of the things on that. But part of that, I think it was last week we were talking about when you're interviewing your people to come on board your team. Do you have some sense of how everybody's exactly the same? If that's what you want, maybe that's not what you want. Maybe it's not what you should have. It's better to have different people with different experiences and all that can all really truly work together. And there's some role where you can do that, and that can be a benefit for your team. So yeah, it's not like that that you have to do that or anything like that. But as a leader, do you truly have a sense of who your people are and know where that strength is and their individual strengths and how that comes together as strength for the team? And it may be that you, Steve, feel that you feel that dopamine and that applause when you do this thing over here. Well, if they tell me to go do that, I'm hurting the team to a certain extent. Because you know what? You're going to feel the real reward and the real benefit and the experiencing the applause when you do that. Whereas I might feel that on something else.
Yep.
So all of that is sort of part of the leader making sure you have the right team and the good team that can make that difference, because all of that is huge. But it's just one little tiny picture of how that neuroscience aspect can bring in the aspects of the neuroscience on it. And so it's interesting when you realize that all of that can be applied and has a part to play in the overall situational awareness. Because here's the thing, if I know my people and I know that Billy Bob over here is great in this little challenge right here, you know what? Come on over, buddy. I'm going to give you credit for it. You take care of this? You bet. I'll take care of that. Good. You do it, buddy. I'll give you credit.
I mean, what are the things that motivate with the release of all these chemicals? You have the feeling of accomplishment,
mm-hmm.
and then you have the recognition. So there's two things. Are there other things there that come into play?
Basically, anything, and that could be effective based on an individual person, because the dopamine is something when the brain on the person feels they've really accomplished something, and in the background they almost have a sense that people are clapping for them, kind of thing,
Right.
and patting them on the back, giving them a thumbs up, and all this sort of stuff. If you have like I say, the neurotransmitter of oxytocin, that talks about kind of oneness in people. And so if you and I are working together, and oxytocin is what really kind of drives me, I tell you what, to the extent where we feel like we're a real team here, we're almost family, that's going to make me more successful, and I might get a little bit of a dopamine on that once I feel that.
Yep.
Kind of thing. And the other part, the other chemical I didn't mention is norepinephrine. Then the brain releases norepinephrine when it's a fight or flight situation. Well, guess what? On the team, you may have one person that says, you know what? I'm going to stand up for this team with whatever I got to do. And, when you and I are kind of struggling on something or whatever, and they come up and we have a sense that they're fighting for us, they're standing there with us when we're challenged with something, kind of thing. That sometimes can generate it. So it's interesting when you look at the neurotransmitters that the brain has and releases, and how that can all play out. But it also does kind of toy that. Are you just going to go back and go with what that says regardless? Probably don't want to, because you know what? A lot of that is predicated on kind of your interpretation of what you're seeing. And so the aspect on that is, if you totally gravitate to just what your brain is kind of making you feel there, you're probably not helping yourself. But
So we do have a question. I don't want to run out of time.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
But instantfeedbacksteve@gmail.com is how you can reach us, like Kelsey did from Newark, New Jersey. She says, I'm considering a career change. How do you find your true purpose in life?
Wow, that could be an hour-long talk. But,
I guess so, right?
But I will say this: one of the things that I would do if I was coaching her, and I think you said her name was Kelsey.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. What I would say for Kelsey is, I said, well, Kelsey, if you think back to your journey so far, at key points in your life journey, what were the couple of things along that journey that just drove you, that just boom? When did you sort of experience that? When did you sort of feel that? And when she perhaps told me what one or two of them were, I would then ask her some questions like, okay, what made you feel that at those key points in time? What is it that made you feel that? Because it could be that the center of what we used to call why it matters with Sherpa coaching is the aspect of, what is your why it matters? What's that central thing in here that drives who you are? And in your career right now, are you getting that? It sounds like she isn't, but if you think about and you get some clarity on what that truly is, my why it matters is to be free. And that doesn't mean that I have to be free to do anything I want and you can't say anything. No, what it means is I always have freedom to choose. I always have freedom to choose and make a choice. And some of those choices in my life have been good. Some of them I could have made them better, kind of thing with where I was going. But what is that central thing as you look back in your journey, and perhaps what you're feeling right now? What is that one thing that is driving the center of who you are as a person? What makes you feel like it's like the entire stadium is standing up and cheering for you, not because of what you accomplished, because of what you're doing in light of who you are? And so what I would suggest for there just as a simple point on that, because like I said, that could be an hour-long talk, but I would, for her with the question, it's a great question, and I'm glad that she mentioned that. But I would say that what is that central thing that drives who you are? What makes you want to do such and such? And what is it in your character with who you are that is that central thing? And what I might encourage her to do is to look back on that journey and simply say this: fill in the blank of either to blank or to be blank, and see how you would fill that in.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And you know what? Have her give some thought on it based on her journey and based on what she's feeling right now. How would she do that? And you know what? I had one attorney client that I was working with. I think I shared it on a story probably about 14 months ago. But this guy thought he was an attorney. He was a defense attorney. And I'll just share this with you very quickly. But he was a defense attorney. And he initially thought that his why it matters was to win. You can imagine an attorney would think that. But you could tell in his body language, I don't buy that. Him talking, and he went through a time when he was in the military. Are you still there?
I'm here, and you froze up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I'll keep talking then, but
Sure.
I'll just say that this, that he, I kept him talking. He was talking about this situation that he witnessed, and everything in it, his nonverbal communication totally changed. I mean, the tone in his voice, the shoulders, everything. And I shared that with him. And what he realized, his central thing was not to win, but to be right. And he looked at me and he said, now I know why I got into defense law, because the Constitution that we have says that even if you're guilty, you're entitled to defense for your, when you're charged and everything. Sure. And so I just found that interesting that, but if she can give some thoughts on that, and she would like to, and if she can kind of fill that in, maybe that'll help her decide where she wants to go from it. But it's almost anything based on kind of who you are, but have sort of a sense of who you are and kind of where you're wanting to go with it.
And you're filling the blank before, I think, was spot on. I mean, that's making me think.
Cool. I'm glad it did. I'm glad. Yeah.
That was a good one.
Like I say, it's to blank or to be blank. And if you can fill that in on something that is deeply central in who you are, that'll probably give you a hint of kind of where you want to go with it.
Or we've got you. You're always available if somebody wants to talk, right?
You bet.
Easy to find, coachingforrelevance.com. And I know that you're available. It's not a big sales pitch or anything. You're available. Somebody wants to talk, at least start the process, maybe for some change or maybe better leadership on their team. And that's a no charge initially when you get together with somebody.
That's true. Yeah. I just build relationships. Now, if they have a need and they want some coaching, we'll come up with something, but based on what their need is. But yeah, I don't charge anybody just to get on the phone and have a chat. And so I enjoy building relationships. So yeah, they can reach out to my website, coachingforrelevance.com, and my contact information is on the homepage, but they can check it out if they want to. And all that. I like building relationships.
Yeah. Great talking with you. Great topic today. I was wondering where we're going to go with that, but it definitely is very clear in terms of what you're doing and your perception of what you're doing. What I'm doing is I got to shut us down because they're going to shut us off.
Sounds good. Well, Steve, listen, man, it's good to see you again, buddy.
Thank you, Randy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Well. Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.